1 year passed on the Velk homeworld. Yuna's assignment was ending. Her ship would arrive in 3 days to take her back to Earth, back to oceans and forests and soft green grass, back to a world where people said please without thinking about it. She should have been happy. She should have been excited to go home. But as she packed her small bag, she felt only sadness. This harsh red world had become her home too. And the 3 cubs who had grown so much in 1 year had become her family. Tika was almost as tall as her father now. She was training to be a warrior, but she led her unit differently than other Velk leaders. She asked her teammates for ideas. She thanked them for their efforts. The other trainers thought she was strange, but her unit won every competition. They worked together like one body with many hands. Bora had become a scholar. She spent her days studying the old Velk texts, looking for forgotten wisdom. She had found stories from long ago, before the Velk became warriors, when they lived in family groups and helped each other survive. She was writing a new book about cooperation and trust, and Nal, small shy Nal, had found his voice. He was not a fighter or a scholar. He was a speaker. He told stories to other cubs. Stories about a strange human word that could make enemies into friends. The other cubs listened with wide eyes, and some of them started using the word too. The secret had spread. It started small. Just a few cubs whispering please to each other in dark corners. But cubs talk. Cubs share. And soon, the word was everywhere. In training yards and schools and family compounds across the city. Young Velk were using please like a secret handshake. A way of saying, I am like you. I believe in something different. The elders did not understand. They saw their children changing and did not know why. Some were angry. Some were scared. But many noticed that the young generation fought less and achieved more. They worked in teams. They shared resources. They were stronger together than any single Velk had ever been alone. On her last morning, Yuna was called to the High Council chambers. She expected trouble. She expected Elder Krav to finally send her away in disgrace. She walked into the great stone hall with her head high, ready to face whatever punishment they had planned, but the hall was not empty. Hundreds of cubs filled the chamber. They stood in rows, young faces turned toward the council platform. Yuna saw Tika, Bora, and Nal at the front. Rosk stood behind them, his arm fully healed, his eyes proud. Elder Krav sat on the high seat, looking down at the crowd with confusion and anger. What is the meaning of this? Krav demanded. Why are there cubs in my council chamber? No one answered. The cubs stood in silence, waiting. Yuna did not know what was happening. She looked at Tika, but Tika only smiled. Then Nal stepped forward. He was still the smallest. He was still the youngest. But he walked to the center of the chamber with steady steps and clear eyes. He stood before the High Council, before the most powerful Velk on the planet, and he did not look afraid. We came to say one thing, Nal said. His voice was quiet, but in the silent chamber everyone heard him clearly. Krav leaned forward. Speak then, cub. What could you possibly have to say to this council? Nal turned and looked at Yuna. His yellow eyes were warm with love and gratitude. Then he looked back at Krav and spoke the words that would change everything. Please let her stay. The silence was complete. No one moved. No one breathed. Krav's face twisted with shock. What did you say? Please, Nal repeated. We are asking. Not demanding. Not challenging, asking, because that is what she taught us. That is what makes us strong. Another cub stepped forward. Please. Then another. Please. And another. Please. One by one, hundreds of young voices joined together. The word filled the chamber like a song. Please, please, please. It echoed off the stone walls. It rang in the air like a bell. It was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was something the Velk had never heard before. It was a request. Made with respect. Made with trust. Made with the belief that the council would listen. That the council would choose to be kind. Krav stood up from his seat. His whole body was shaking. This is madness. This is weakness. You are all infected with human sickness. But the other elders were not so sure. They looked at the cubs with different eyes. They saw strength in those young faces. Not the strength of fangs and claws, but the strength of unity, the strength of trust, the strength of many hearts beating as one. Then Rose stepped forward. He walked past his cubs and stood at the front of the chamber, facing the council. "I was like you once," he said to Krav. "I believed that asking was weakness. I raised my cubs to take what they wanted, to fight for everything, to trust no one. And they were miserable. They fought each other. They feared each other. They were alone, even when they were together." He paused and looked at Tekabora. And Null, his eyes were soft with love. Then a human said one word, "Please," and my cubs took that word and built something beautiful. They learned to ask. They learned to trust. They learned that strength does not mean hurting the ones you love. It means helping them. It means saying, "I need you. Please help me." Rosk turned back to the council. "These cubs are not weak. They are the strongest Velk I have ever seen. And if this council cannot see that, then this council is blind." More parents stepped forward. Not all of them, but many. They stood with their cubs, showing their support. The chamber was divided now. The old way against the new. Fear against trust. Taking against asking. Elder Krav looked at the crowd for a long time. His face was hard. His eyes were cold. But Yuna saw something else there too. Something that looked almost like doubt. Finally, Krav sat back down. He closed his eyes and was silent for many heartbeats. When he opened them again, something had changed. "The human may stay," he said slowly. "For now." The cubs erupted in cheers. They ran to Yuna and surrounded her with warm fur and happy tears. Tika hugged her tight. Bora could not stop laughing. Null buried his face in her shoulder and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Yuna held them all and cried. She cried for the year she had spent on this strange world. She cried for the family she had found. She cried for the future she could now be part of. And above the noise and celebration, she heard the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Cubs all around the chamber were teaching other cubs. Teaching their parents. Teaching the elders. The word spread through the crowd like sunlight through clouds. Please. It was no longer a secret. It was no longer hidden. It was a revolution, quiet and gentle, changing everything without a single drop of blood. Years later, when historians wrote about the change that transformed the Velk people, they would talk about trade agreements and political shifts and cultural exchanges. But those who were there, those who remembered, knew the truth. It started with a human woman who said the wrong word at the wrong time. It started with 3 cubs who made that word their secret code. It started with please, and it changed everything on the day Yuna decided to stay forever. She stood on the red dirt of the Velk homeworld and watched the orange sun set over the mountains. Null stood beside her, holding her hand. He was still small, still young, still the cub who had mouthed a strange word in the dark. "Yuna," he said softly. "Yes?" "Thank you for teaching us." Yuna smiled and squeezed his hand. "I did not teach you anything. You taught yourselves. I just gave you a word." Null shook his head. "You gave us more than a word. You gave us hope. You gave us a new way to be strong." Yuna knelt down and looked into his yellow eyes. "No, Null, you already had the strength. The word just helped you find it." Null hugged her tight. Over his shoulder, Yuna saw Tika and Bora walking toward them. She saw Rose following behind, his scarred face soft with peace. She saw a family that had grown from strangers into something unbreakable. In a galaxy ruled by fangs and fire, one human word had rewritten what it meant to be strong. And it started with 3 little cubs who learned to say please, and in the end, that was enough to change the world. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky was its usual orange color. The next moment, it turned black. The wind began to scream. Red dust filled the air so thick that Yuna could not see her own hands. Rosk had seen storms like this before. He shouted orders to the cubs, telling them to get inside. He ran around the compound, locking doors and covering windows. Yuna helped where she could, but she was not strong like the Velk. The wind pushed her around like a leaf. They all made it inside the main building. Just before the storm reached full strength, the walls shook. The roof groaned. Through the cracks in the windows, Yuna could see lightning the color of blood tearing across the sky. "This is a bad one," Rosk said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were watching the ceiling carefully. "Everyone stay away from the walls." The cubs huddled together near the fire pit. Nal was shaking. Bora had her arms around him. Tika stood in front of them both, trying to look brave. Yuna sat nearby, feeling useless. She was not built for this world. She was soft and small and weak. Then the beam fell. There was a terrible cracking sound. Part of the ceiling gave way. A heavy wooden beam came down fast, and Rosk was directly under it. He tried to move, but he was not quick enough. The beam hit his arm and pinned him to the ground. Rosk roared in pain. It was the first time Yuna had ever heard him make a sound like that. The cub screamed. Nal started crying. Bora froze. Tika ran toward her father, but the beam was too heavy. She could not move it alone. "Father!" Tika shouted. She pulled at the beam with all her strength. It did not move. "Father, hold on." Rosk's face was twisted with pain. His arm was trapped and bleeding. He tried to push the beam with his other hand, but he was in a bad position. He could not get the leverage he needed. "Get the human," Rosk growled through his teeth. She cannot lift it either, but maybe together Yuna was already moving. She grabbed the beam and pulled. It was impossibly heavy. She could feel her muscles tearing from the effort, but the beam barely shifted. "It is not enough," Yuna gasped. "We need more hands." Tika looked at her siblings. Bora was still frozen. Nal was still crying. They were scared. They did not know what to do. And in that moment, Tika understood something important. She could not do this with commands. She could not do this with growls and force. Her siblings were too frightened to respond to dominance. They needed something else. Tika took a deep breath. She walked to Bora and looked her sister in the eyes. "Bora," she said softly, "please, I need your help. Please help me move the beam." The word cut through Bora's fear like a knife through fog. She blinked. She looked at Tika as she saw something she had never seen before. Her proud, strong, fierce sister was asking. Not demanding? Asking. Bora nodded slowly. "Okay." They walked to the beam together. Tika looked at Nal, who was still crying in the corner. "Nal," she called gently, "please come help us. We cannot do this without you. Please." Nal wiped his eyes. He was the smallest. He was always the weakest. No one ever needed him for anything. But his sister was saying please. His sister was saying she needed him. He stood up on shaking legs and walked to the beam. "Okay," Yuna said. "Everyone grab the beam. On 3, we lift together. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. 4 bodies working as one. The beam was still heavy. It still fought against them. But this time it moved. Slowly at first, then faster. Inch by inch, they lifted it off Rosk's arm. Rosk pulled himself free with a grunt of pain. He crawled away from the beam just as they dropped it. It crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder. Yuna ran to Rosk and looked at his arm. It was broken. She could see the bone pushing against the skin. But he was alive. He was free. "We need to set this bone," she said, "and stop the bleeding. Do you have medical supplies?" Rosk pointed to a cabinet on the wall. Yuna found bandages and splints and some kind of Velk medicine that smelled like burnt metal. She did not know exactly how to treat a Velk, but she knew the basics. She worked quickly, trying to remember everything she had learned in her training. The cubs stood guard while she worked. Tika watched the ceiling for more falling beams. Bora kept the fire burning. Nal brought water and clean cloth. They worked together without being told. They anticipated what was needed and provided it. Rosk watched them through half-closed eyes. The pain was making him dizzy, but he could still see. He could still hear. And what he saw and heard amazed him. His cubs were talking to each other softly, calmly, They used that word over and over. Please pass the cloth. Please hold this. Please check if father is okay. The word flowed between them like water, smooth and natural, connecting them in a way Rosk had never seen. This was not weakness. This was something else entirely. When Yuna finished wrapping his arm, Rosk lay back and stared at the ceiling. The storm was still raging outside, but inside, everything felt strangely peaceful. That word, he said quietly. Please. Yuna looked at him. Yes? What does it truly mean? You told me before, but I did not understand. Tell me again. Yuna sat down next to him. The cubs gathered close to listen. Please means many things, Yuna said. But at its heart it means this. I see you. I respect you. I trust you enough to ask instead of take. When you say please, you are telling someone that they matter, that their choice matters, that you believe they will help you because they want to, not because they have to. Rosk was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice was different, softer, almost gentle. On our world, we believe asking is weakness. We believe that only the strong survive. But tonight, my cubs asked each other for help. And because they asked, because they trusted, they saved my life. He turned his head and looked at Tikabora. And Nal, his yellow eyes were warm for the first time since Yuna had arrived. Maybe asking is not weakness, he said. Maybe asking takes more courage than taking. Maybe saying please is harder than saying give me. Tika's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Father ... Rosk reached out with his good arm and touched her face gently. I have been teaching you to fight alone, but you taught yourselves to fight together. You are stronger than I ever was. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the compound something had changed. A wall had come down. Not a wall of stone, but a wall between hearts. Yuna watched the family come together, and she felt hope blooming in her chest. Maybe one word could not change a whole world, but maybe it could change one family. And maybe that was enough to start. When the storm finally ended and the orange sky returned, Rosk looked at Yuna with new eyes. Thank you, he said. And then, slowly, carefully, like he was learning to walk for the first time, please stay. My cubs need you. I think I need you too. Yuna smiled through her tears. I would like that very much. It was not permission from the council. It was not safety from the elders. But it was something more important. It was family, and family, Yuna knew, was worth more than anything. The message came on a cold morning. A runner arrived at the compound gates before sunrise. He carried a black metal seal with the mark of the High Council. Rosk read the message in silence, and his face became hard as stone. I must go to the council chambers, he told Yuna. You will stay here with the cubs. Do not leave the compound. Yuna nodded. She saw the darkness in his eyes and felt afraid. Is something wrong? Rosk did not answer. He put on his formal armor, the kind Velk wore only for important meetings, and left without looking back. Yuna stood at the gate and watched him disappear into the red dust. The cubs came to find her soon after. Where did father go? Tika asked. She tried to sound strong, but Yuna heard the worry in her voice. To see the High Council, Yuna said. I do not know why. The cubs looked at each other. Bora's ears went flat. Nal moved closer to his sisters and grabbed Tika's fur with his small hand. They knew something bad was happening. Cubs always knew. Yuna spent the day trying to keep them calm. She told them stories about Earth. She showed them pictures of oceans and forests and cities made of glass. The cubs listened, but their eyes kept going to the gate. They were waiting for their father. Rosk came back when the sun was setting. His face was still hard, but now there was something else there. Something that looked almost like confusion. He walked past the cubs without speaking and went straight to Yuna. We need to talk, he said. Alone? Yuna followed him to the main room. He closed the door and stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he turned around, his yellow eyes were burning. The council knows, he said. Yuna's heart stopped. Knows what? About the word, please. Rosk spat it out like it was poison. Someone heard my cubs using it. They reported it to Elder Krav. He says you are contaminating our youth. He says you are teaching them weakness. He wants you removed from our world. Yuna felt cold. I only said it once. On my first night here, I did not teach them anything else. But they learned, Rose growled. My cubs, they have been using this word. This human word. They say it to each other when they think no one is listening. But someone was listening. Someone always is. Yuna did not know what to say. She had been so careful. She had followed the rules. But the cubs had taken her word and made it their own, and now everything was falling apart. What did the council decide? She asked quietly. Rosk was silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, like each word was heavy. They gave you a warning. You must stop all cultural interference. No more teaching. No more sharing human ideas. If you break this rule again, you will be sent back to Earth immediately. I understand, Yuna said. I will follow their orders. Rosk nodded. But he did not move. He stood there, looking at her with those strange, burning eyes. I defended you, he said suddenly. In front of the council? Elder Krav wanted you gone today. He said humans are weak and that weakness spreads like sickness. He said my cubs are already infected. Yuna felt a spark of surprise. You defended me? Why? Rosk turned away. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. I do not know, he admitted. I should agree with Krav, I should want you gone, but ... He stopped. His massive hands pressed against the window frame. My cubs have changed, he said. They do not fight like they used to. They help each other. Null does not hide anymore. Bora laughs more. Tika protects her siblings instead of hurting them. I thought they were learning strength, but maybe they were learning something else. Yuna walked closer to him. Commander, I did not mean to cause trouble. I only wanted... I know what you wanted, Rosk interrupted. You wanted to help. Humans always want to help. It is your weakness. He paused. Or maybe it is your strength. I cannot tell anymore. He turned back to face her. The council is watching now. You must be careful. My cubs must be careful. If anyone hears that word again, there will be no more warnings. Yuna nodded. I will tell them. That night, Yuna gathered the cubs in her small room. She closed the door and sat down on the floor so she could look at them face to face. I have to tell you something important, she said. The council knows about the word. About please. They are angry. They think I taught you something bad. The cubs were quiet. Tika's eyes went wide. Laura's tail stopped moving. Null pressed himself against the wall. They are going to send you away, Tika said. It was not a question. Not yet, Yuna replied. But if anyone hears you using that word again, they will. I have to stop teaching you. I have to stop sharing human things with you. It is the only way I can stay. Null made a small sound. It was almost a whimper. He crawled forward and sat in front of Yuna, looking up at her with those big yellow eyes. We do not want you to go, he whispered. Yuna felt her heart break a little. I do not want to go either. Then we will be quiet, Bora said. We will not say the word anymore. We will hide it better. No, Yuna said firmly. You should not have to hide. The word is not bad. The idea is not bad. But this is not my world. I cannot change your people. I can only follow their rules. Tika stood up. She walked to Yuna and did something that Velt cubs never did. She lowered her head and pressed her forehead against Yuna's shoulder. It was a sign of deep respect. A sign of family. You already changed us, Tika said quietly. We will not forget. Bora and Null came forward too. They pressed close to Yuna, their warm fur soft against her skin. 4 bodies huddled together in a small room on a harsh world. Sharing a moment of something the Velk had no word for, the Null looked up at Yuna with tears in his yellow eyes. Please, he whispered. Please do not leave us. It was the first time any of the cubs had said the word to an adult. It was the first time they had asked for something so big, so impossible, so important. Yuna held them close and did not answer. She could not promise to stay. She could not promise anything. All she could do was be there in that moment with three small cubs who had learned to say please in a world that only knew how to take. Outside, the wind howled across the red desert. Inside, four hearts beat together in the dark, and Yuna made a silent promise to herself. She would find a way to protect these cubs. She would find a way to protect their secret word. Even if it cost her everything, because some things were worth fighting for. Even for a human who did not know how to fight. 1 week passed on the Velk homeworld. Yuna kept her promise to Rosk. She watched. She listened. She did not teach. She wrote notes about the Velk language in her small room and tried to stay out of the way, but the cubs would not leave her alone. It started with Bora. The middle cub was always curious. She liked to follow Yuna around the compound, sniffing at her strange human smell, watching her write with those soft fingers that had no claws. One morning, while Yuna sat outside reading her notes, Bora came and sat next to her. "Human," Bora said. Her voice was young but already had that rough Velk sound to it. "Yes?" Yuna looked up. "That word? The one you said, please?" Bora tilted her head. "What does it mean?" Yuna hesitated. Rosk had told her not to teach his cubs. But Bora was asking. Refusing to answer a direct question felt wrong. "Please is a word we use when we want something," Yuna said carefully. "It shows respect to the person we are asking. It tells them that we are not demanding. We are asking. We trust them to say yes or no." Bora's yellow eyes blinked slowly. "Trust?" "Yes, when you say please, you give the other person power. You let them choose. It is a gift." Bora was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head. "But trust is weakness. If you give someone power, they will use it against you. Father says this." Yuna smiled softly. "On Earth, we think differently. We believe that trust makes us stronger. When you trust someone, you build something together. You become a team. You are not alone. Alone is safe," Bora said. "Alone is lonely," Yuna replied. Bora did not answer. She stood up and walked away without another word. Yuna thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. That afternoon, Yuna saw something strange. The cubs were in the training yard behind the compound. Rosk had them practicing hunting moves, jumping and rolling and biting at wooden targets. It was rough training. The cubs got hurt often. Rosk did not comfort them. Pain was part of learning. When training ended, the cubs were tired and hungry. Rosk gave them food, but only one piece of meat for all three. It was a test. The strongest would eat first. The weakest would eat last. If there was anything left, Tika grabbed the meat immediately. She was the oldest, the biggest, the strongest. She growled at her siblings, daring them to try and take it from her. Bora stepped back. Nal hid behind a rock. But then something happened. Tika looked at the meat in her jaws. She looked at Bora. She looked at Nal, small and shaking behind the rock. And for a moment, something changed in her eyes. She put the meat down. "Bora," she said quietly, "do you want some?" Bora stared at her sister. This was not how things worked. Tika never shared. Tika always took. "Are you asking me?" Bora whispered. Tika's ears went flat against her head. She looked embarrassed, angry at herself, but she nodded slowly. "Please," Tika said. The word was so quiet that Yuna almost did not hear it. "Please eat with me." Bora did not move for a long moment. Then she walked forward and sat next to her sister. Together they ate the meat. When they were halfway done, Tika looked at the rock where Nal was hiding. "Nal," she called. "Come, please." The small cub came out slowly. His eyes were wide with confusion, but he walked to his sisters and ate with them. All three cubs shared the meal. No fighting. No growling. Just three siblings eating together. Yuna watched from the doorway. Her heart felt warm. Rosk was not watching. He had gone inside to sharpen his weapons. He did not see what happened, but Yuna saw. And she understood. The cubs had taken her word and made it their own. Over the next few days, Yuna noticed more changes. The cubs used the word please only when they were alone together. Never in front of their father. Never in front of other Velk. It was their secret. Their code. When Bora wanted to play with Tikka's training stick, she said please. When Null was scared of the dark and wanted to sleep near his sisters, he whispered please. When Tikka needed help carrying water from the well, she asked her siblings with that strange human word. Please became the key that unlocked something new. It was not about weakness. It was about connection. The cubs were learning that asking for help did not make them small. It made them part of something bigger. One evening, Yuna was walking through the compound when she heard voices behind a storage building. She stopped and listened. We cannot tell father, Tikka was saying. He will be angry. He will think we are weak. But we are not weak, Bora argued. We are stronger now. We work together. Before, we only fought. Now we help each other. The word helps, Null said softly. It was rare for him to speak. When Tikka says please, I know she is not going to hurt me. I know she needs me. It makes me brave. Yuna felt tears in her eyes. She backed away quietly so the cubs would not know she had heard them. That night she wrote in her journal. She wrote about the power of small things. A single word. A simple idea. On Earth, please was something children learned before they could walk. It was basic, normal, nothing special, but here, on a world where strength was everything, that small word was changing 3 young lives. It was teaching them that there was another way to be strong. Not through force. Not through fear, but through trust, through asking, through saying, I need you and I believe you will help me. Rosp still did not know. He saw that his cubs fought less. He saw that they worked together better, but he did not understand why. He thought they were finally learning discipline. He did not know they were learning something far more powerful. Yuna wondered how long the secret could last. The cubs were not careful. Sooner or later, someone would hear them. Someone would tell the council, and then everything would change, but for now, 3 small cubs were sharing a secret word in the shadows of their father's house. They were building something new, something that had never existed on this world before, and it all started with one human, who said please at the wrong time, or maybe it was the right time after all. Yuna looked out her window at the orange sky. Somewhere in the compound she heard the cubs laughing together. Not fighting, laughing, it was a rare sound on this harsh world. She smiled and whispered to herself, please let this last. Please let them keep this. She did not know if anyone was listening, but she hoped. Because hope was another thing the Velk did not believe in, and maybe it was time for them to learn. The ship landed on hard red dirt, and Yuna Park stepped out into the hot wind of a world that was not her own. The sky was orange. The air smelled like metal and dust. She was far from Earth, far from everything she knew, and she was alone. She was a linguist. Her job was to learn how aliens talked and to help humans understand them. The government had sent her here to live with the Velk people for 1 full year. She would study their language, their customs, their way of life. It sounded simple on paper. But standing on this strange planet, watching the massive shapes move in the distance, Yuna felt her heart beat faster. The Velk were not like humans. They stood over 2 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in thick gray fur. Their faces had long snouts filled with sharp teeth, and their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk and build cities. They were predators. Everything about them said so. A transport vehicle came to pick her up. The driver was a young Velk who did not speak to her. He only grunted and pointed at the seat. Yuna climbed in and stayed quiet. She had read all the reports. The Velk did not value small talk. They valued strength, power, and dominance. Words were tools, not gifts. You spoke when you had something important to say. Otherwise, you stayed silent. The vehicle took her to a large compound at the edge of a rocky hill. The buildings were made of stone and metal, built to survive storms and war. This was the home of Commander Rosk, The Velk warrior who had agreed to host her during her assignment, Rosk, was waiting at the gate. He was bigger than the other Velk she had seen. His fur was dark, almost black, and a long scar ran across his face from his left eye to his jaw. He did not smile. Velk did not smile. He looked at Yuna the way a wolf looks at a rabbit, not hungry, but not friendly either. "You are the human," he said. His voice was deep and rough. "Yes," Yuna replied. She kept her voice calm. "Thank you for allowing me to stay in your home." Rosk made a low sound in his throat. It was not a word. It was something between a growl and a grunt. Yuna understood it meant he did not care about her thanks. He was doing this because the council had ordered it, not because he wanted to. He turned and walked into the compound. Yuna followed. Inside, the home was simple but large. There were few decorations. Everything had a purpose. Yuna noticed weapons on the walls, trophies from hunts, and a large fire pit in the center of the main room. The Velk did not waste space on beauty. They only cared about survival. Then she saw the cubs, 3 of them. Small compared to their father, but still bigger than Yuna. They had the same gray fur, the same yellow eyes. The oldest one stood tall and proud, watching Yuna with suspicion. The middle one tilted her head with curiosity, and the youngest one hid behind his siblings, peeking out with wide, frightened eyes. "These are my cubs," Rosk said. "Tika, Boris, Nol." Tika, the oldest, growled softly. Bora, the middle one, stepped closer and sniffed the air near Yuna. Nol, the youngest, stayed hidden. "Their mother is dead," Rosk continued. His voice did not change when he said this. There was no sadness in his words. Velk did not show sadness. It was weakness. "I raised them alone. You will not interfere with how I teach them. You are here to watch and learn. Nothing more." Yuna nodded. "I understand." But she did not fully understand. Not yet. That night, Yuna sat in her small room and listened to the sounds of the compound. She heard Rosk's heavy footsteps. She heard the cubs running and playing. And then she heard something else, fighting, snarling, the sound of small bodies hitting the floor. She opened her door and looked out. The 3 cubs were in the main room, fighting over a piece of meat. Tika had it in her jaws, but Bora was pulling at it, and Nal was trying to grab whatever scraps fell. They bit and scratched and growled. There was no sharing. There was no asking. Only taking. Roska sat nearby, watching. He did not stop them. This was normal. This was how Velk cubs learned. The strong take. The weak wait. Yuna felt something twist in her chest. She knew she was not supposed to interfere. But the words came out before she could stop them. "If you want something," she said softly, "you should say please." The cubs froze. They turned and looked at her. Rosk's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" He growled. Yuna swallowed. "I said they should say please. If they want something from each other." Rosk stood up slowly. He was so tall, so powerful. Yuna felt very small. "Please," he repeated. The word sounded strange in his mouth, wrong. "What is this word?" "It is a human word," Yuna explained. "When you want something, you say please. It shows respect. It means you are asking, not demanding." Rosk stared at her for a long moment. Then he made that low growling sound again. "Velk do not ask," he said. "Velk take. Asking is weakness. You will not teach my cubs to be weak." He turned away from her and walked to his room. The cubs stayed still, watching Yuna. Then Tika snorted and went back to eating the meat. Bora followed. Only Nal remained, staring at Yuna with those big yellow eyes. His mouth moved, very slowly, very quietly. No sound came out. But Yuna saw the shape of the word on his lips. Please. Then he turned and ran after his siblings. Yuna went back to her room and closed the door. She sat on her bed and thought about what had just happened. She had made a mistake. She had spoken when she should have stayed silent. Rosk was angry. The council might hear about this, but she could not stop thinking about little Nal and the way he had mouthed that word, like he was holding a secret. Like he had found something precious and hidden it away where no one could take it from him. Please, such a small word. Such a simple thing. But on this world, where everything was taken by force, maybe that small word meant more than anyone knew. Yuna lay down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be difficult. She would have to be more careful. She would have to remember that she was a guest in a world that did not want her lessons, but somewhere in the compound. A small cub was whispering a human word to himself in the dark, and that was the beginning of everything.